It's 11:05. I'm going to make this a very brief introduction. Tom and I, we were talking last night about when we met, but at least since 1990. We met at least back in 1990. I met Tom when he was in Denver, and he's still in that area. And at one time, he was a member of the CLR National Board, and we have minimum, whenever we meet for breakfast when I'm out in Denver, it's always a minimum 2 hours. So, but he is a futurist. He travels all around the world, talks about great things. You can read his bio in the folder, and I'm going to turn it over to him right away.
All right, thank you. I'll first mention that I get asked to come in and speak to groups. They want me to be both entertaining and provocative. And so I will hope to achieve those things this morning, and probably with an emphasis on being provocative. So, all right, let's go ahead and get started here. Every 10 seconds, another 17 people die. Somewhere in the world, every 10 seconds, by the time it takes me to walk across the stage here, every 10 seconds, another 17 people die. 151,600, that's the number of people that die every day in the world, on average. Some days a little more, some days a little less, but that's roughly the average. And it's been going at that pace for several years now. So a logical question to ask is, has our mortality rate for the world gone up or down over the last few years? Well, if you look at the statistics, it's probably kind of hard to read here, but it has gone up a little bit in 2020 and a little bit more in 2021, but the mortality rate is actually still less than it was in 2013, and much less than it was in 2012 and before that. So we have lots of things wrong in the world. We have lots of things that are needing our attention. We have 34% of our population is obese, 20% smoke, 20% have over 5 drinks a day. Only 25% are physically active, and 55.6 million are diagnosed with mental disorders. That's a lot of problems wrapped up in this one slide here. And if we look at the top 50 nations in the world today, we are number 1 in obesity. We're number 5 in cancer. We're number 3 in depression. In the US, we're number 3 in diabetes, number 5 in suicide, and number 11 in Alzheimer's. And if you're wondering where the distrust is between kind of the general population and all of these government agencies that have 3-letter acronyms, this is part of it, because we're not special. We're not accomplishing all the things that we should be, because we're supposed to be the best. So I like to put together thought experiments, and in some of our mastermind groups, we pull people together and ask them provocative questions to try to actually see where the discussion goes. And so we brought people together and we said, well, let's start with the assumption that sometime in the future we're going to be able to achieve a cure for aging so that no person should ever die, ever. If we can fix human aging, repair accidents, people after accidents, we cure diseases, modify deviant behavior, then people no longer need to die. As a result, no person should ever die, ever. Is that where we want to go? And if not, why not? Should that be the goal of our healthcare system? Should we set it up so that we don't want anybody to die? Is that kind of the goal that we have in mind? See, we're a very backward-looking society. We're backward-looking because it's just human nature. We've all personally experienced the past. As we look around us, we see evidence of the past all around us. In fact, all information we come into contact with is essentially history. So the past is very knowable, and yet we're going to be spending all the rest of our lives in the future. So it's almost as if we're walking backwards into the future. My job as a futurist is to help turn people around, to give them some idea of what the future might hold. So how does the future get created? Well, the future gets created in the minds of everybody around us. We all participate in creating the future. Certainly some of us have more influence than others, but people make decisions today based on their understanding of what the future holds. So I use this phrase quite a bit: the future creates the present. This is just the opposite of what most people think. Most people think that what we're doing today is somehow going to create the future, but from a little different perspective, it's these images of the future that we hold in our head determine our actions today. So here's the key thing. If we change somebody's vision of the future, we change the way they make decisions today. And so that's my goal here today. My goal here is to change your vision of the future, and as a result, you will leave here making slightly different decisions. We'll see if that works out, okay? As a futurist, I get asked if I have a crystal ball. People ask me that quite a bit. Yes, I do have a crystal ball, and it was sitting around at home, and my wife says, why don't you just take this to the office? It's just sitting around collecting dust. So I took my crystal ball, I put it in the car. I was probably no more than 4 or 5 minutes down the road, and I looked over, and my crystal ball had actually started a fire on the seat next to me. Now, a crystal ball is a giant lens with the sun shining in, and I had some papers underneath it. Luckily, I was able to put it out, and it didn't cause any serious damage. But then a few minutes later, I had this giant revelation. And the revelation, which obviously came from my crystal ball, the revelation was that the newspaper headlines the next day were all set to print the headlines that the futurist was killed by his own crystal ball. and he didn't see it coming. So that's my disclaimer. I don't see everything. As Larry Page says, the founder of Google, the main reason companies fail is because they miss the future. I happen to agree with that. So how do I determine what's important and what isn't? There are so many new headlines saying that this is going to change everything. And I look at lots of these research reports, and there's things that are coming out of the woodwork that are really destined to change everything, and then nothing happens. So I look for what's getting traction, and I spend a lot of time focused on what's getting traction. I use this as an example here. This is, in my mind, the most successful product launch in all history. This is the Tesla Model 3. In 2016, Elon Musk put out a few tweets saying that he was going to produce the Tesla Model 3. And over the next couple months, over 450,000 people put money down to be on a waiting list for a car that they knew virtually nothing about. They each put $1,000 down to be on this waiting list. And the cars, there was no drawings, there was no specs, there was no nothing, but they wanted that car. And suddenly, the rest of the automobile industry woke up and said, wow, we didn't know that everybody wanted electric cars. And so instantly, the entire automobile industry shifted gears and started paying attention to electric vehicles. So the cars that we drive today have actually been in development for the past 120 years. So it's actually taken that long to get to cars that are this good. 120 years. And so people that have been designing cars for the last 120 years have been focused on one particular function, which is driving. That's the key thing that happens in a car. So as we move into the driverless era, people are no longer going to drive. So this entire body of knowledge, this human relationship with the steering wheel, with the gas pedals, with the dashboard, all of that goes out the window. And we focus, as designers of automobiles, they start focusing on all the other activities that happen in the car other than driving. And then you have to ask, well, is it the same job? We've thrown out all of this past work that's been done, and this question is going to be central to so many things around the world as we move into these new technological eras. So COVID-19 has been a very dark time in human history, but even in the darkest time, people with extraordinary character have lived among us, guiding on a pathway to a better future. So I'm going to go through 6 different disruptions and opportunities, and we'll start with rapidly changing demographics. In 2019, Elon Musk was giving a talk in Shanghai, and he says, I think the biggest problem the world will face in 20 years is population collapse. And he emphasized the word collapse. Now this is important because in 1969, a book came out by Paul Ehrlich that the title of it was Population Bomb. And he charted out all the statistics. The population of the world was growing very rapidly, and he was predicting that we were overcrowding the earth and that people would start dying from overpopulation as soon as 1970s. And so that mindset has been very pervasive. It's gone through society, and you still hear lots of people talking about all the overpopulation problems when it's actually starting to crest and go the other way. Now, all of the countries on this map that are in blue have declining populations. All of them in the tan color are about even, and the ones in red are the ones that are having kids. In fact, over half of all the population on planet Earth is being born in 6 countries. These 6 countries: Nigeria, Congo, Tanzania, Ethiopia, Angola, and Pakistan. And each of these countries has the distinction of being largely ignored by the rest of the world. If you see the percentage after the countries, that's the literacy rate in each of these countries. I will also mention that I don't think Wells has a single mission in any of these countries, but we can go into that later. All of these countries have access, all of these kids growing up over there have access to smartphones. Now they don't have 5G access, but that's coming. That'll be coming somewhere down the road. By 2050, at the current growth rate of each of these countries, the most populous country in the world will be India, followed by China, followed by Nigeria, followed by the US, and then Pakistan, and Congo, and Indonesia. It's a radical shift in populations there. So the country that has the lowest birth rate of any country in the world right now is South Korea. You need 2.1 kids per family in order to maintain an even population. South Korea has 0.8. That's how fast they're growing. So they're losing population. They're growing very old, very fast, and Korea and Japan are fighting for the bottom. So by 2100, over 23 countries will lose over half of all their population. Now, I happen to go to Korea quite a bit, and I've been telling them that at their current rate, the last Korean will be born in 2300. The entire population of the country will be down to about 50,000 people, and I showed them statistically how that was going to happen. So I said, they better turn that around. They don't believe in immigration. The US, on the other hand, we have the ability to open the gates and allow immigration, and lots of people come in. That's true today. That may not be true 10 years from now. So we're on the verge of transitioning the way we think about babies, the way we think about young kids. All right, number 2, digital twin technology will transform the human experience. Now, you may not be familiar with digital twin technology, but as we're adding sensors to all kinds of equipment around us, it can be a front-end loader like this, or adding sensors to a cruise ship or a turbine in a power plant. We are then able to monitor this equipment remotely from the other side of the world and understand how it's working, and we can actually get to a point of monitoring it, and we can anticipate failures and then actually intervene before the failure actually happens. The next step in all of this is remote robotics. Remote robotics is the ability to then operate this equipment from a distance, operate it from literally the other side of the world. And a lot of the surgeons that are working with the Da Vinci surgical machine are able to perform an operation on a patient that's in an operating room 1,000 miles away. And so that opens the door for lots of interesting opportunities. But it also means that we're going to be able to operate other equipment a long ways away. If somebody is a farmer here in Wisconsin, if they retire down in Arizona, they can still farm, they can still operate the equipment from down in Arizona. Is that a good thing? You never have to retire then. How much longer are we still going to need to have pilots in aircrafts? We could have the pilots sitting in a cubicle in India. We don't have to pay them near as much to be a pilot in India sitting in a cubicle. Would you trust that airline? Maybe not right now, but but eventually what will happen is we will get rid of the co-pilot, and the co-pilot will be remote, and then both of them will be remote. So how much longer before digital twin technology is common in humans? How much longer before doctors can monitor somebody's health remotely through their digital twin? That's coming. See, number 3 is healthcare is transitioning from an industry driven by pharmaceuticals to an industry driven by data. And the pharmaceutical companies are aware of this, and they're focusing heavily on accumulating all of the data that they need. So will the human genome just become another programming language? If you have a cold sometime in the future, rather than giving you pills to fix your cold, the doctor could just prescribe an algorithm for you. Is that the best medicine? Maybe. In 2012, Jennifer Doudna, who won the Nobel Prize, was the co-inventor of CRISPR-Cas9. And this is the type of CRISPR that you can do this cut and paste and change segments of DNA on people. But CRISPR is a revolution that's touching all aspects of society. So here's some of the aspects of CRISPR that we should pay attention to. CRISPR can correct genetic errors that cause disease even before a baby is born. CRISPR can eliminate microbes that cause disease, including COVID. CRISPR is being used to develop clean meat technology. This is lab-grown meat technology. CRISPR is being used to develop healthier foods. CRISPR may even be used in the revival of extinct species. There's an effort going on right now where George Church and Ben Lamb, this is a Harvard geneticist and an entrepreneur, got together and they raised money to revive the woolly mammoth, only it's going to be a revived version of the woolly mammoth. It'll be partly Asian elephant, partly woolly mammoth, and they expect to have this by 2026. So we'll see if this animal ever gets born. CRISPR may eliminate the threat of disease-spreading mosquitoes. This is already happening. They've genetically modified mosquitoes, so they're going to be less threatening to humans. By the way, mosquitoes are the #1 killer of humans and animals. They're responsible for about 1 million deaths every year. And CRISPR has the potential to make transplantable organs safer and more readily available. And then CRISPR could help people have healthier babies as well as designer babies. So this sets the stage for us to talk about designer babies. Sometime in the very near future, when some young lady finds out that they're pregnant, they will have the option to go to a geneticist to discuss enhancement options of their unborn child. See, designer babies will not only give them the hair color, the lip shape, the lash length, and ear shape they've requested, but they will also be bigger, stronger, more durable humans, intensely bright, physically efficient, with greater life expectancy, super resilient, super confident, and just plain super. So as a thought experiment, how many people would pay to add Elon Musk's DNA to their unborn child? And if you don't happen to like Elon Musk, we'll just pick out any of the Nobel Prize winners for the last couple decades and use those as an example. How many people would pay to do that? I'm guessing quite a few. Once super children start entering our schools, we will struggle with ways to super educate the super mind. Some super kids will know more than all their teachers combined before they reach 5th grade. We will need to invent new ways to engage super kids both physically and mentally. So if you can imagine a 9-year-old kid that's fluent in 27 languages, who has completed the equivalent of 7 PhDs and is capable of doing mental dictations while simultaneously coding algorithms for a video game, reading a book, watching television, riding a bicycle all at the same time, and you get an idea of what we're talking about here. So what's the lifetime value of a superhuman? This becomes a very intriguing question. What's the lifetime value of a superhuman? Because the lifetime value of a superhuman may indeed be 100x. It might be 100 times, that person may be 100 times more valuable than the average person today. One superhuman on average may add as much as $1 billion to the global economy on average. And if that's the case, it becomes a race between countries to see which country can have the most superhumans. Countries may even pay moms to spend time at luxury resorts, plus salary, plus bonus once baby is born, to encourage more superhumans. It may actually become illegal to have a normal baby again. I mean, you might be required to move your child into the superhuman status. Countries may require that. And women would actually like this because it becomes a complete baby moon vacation at a luxury resort. They can go hang out there. They can have staff people that help them out. Maybe. We'll see. But super babies will not always be super. They will have little patience for those who can't keep up and quickly relegate slow thinkers to lower status. So super babies are going to have super tantrums. If they don't like the food, they may very well throw it against the wall completely on the other side of the house. They will also attempt to rewrite the rules of status, privilege, and prominence. But the pace of change is mandating that we produce faster, smarter, better graded humans, but our current systems are preventing that from happening. It's simply not reasonable to think that tweaking our current systems will cause them to start producing exponentially better results. So then we move into an era of teacher bots. And if you think this is so far out, I'm actually working with a company that's developing these right now. It's actually a Korean company that's based in California. So during times of great chaos comes great opportunities. So the role of education is changing. It's no longer possible to anticipate the needs of business 4 to 5 years in advance. I came across this statistic that the world's base of knowledge is doubling every 12 hours. And I was kind of stunned. And then I thought about it for a while, and I came to the conclusion that this is just a total crock, that's not really what's going on. First of all, we don't know how to qualify what knowledge is, so that's one of the problems. And then where is all this quote-unquote knowledge being stored at? And if it's doubling, this has this exponential growth curve going on. That means that we run out of any kind of storage within, I don't know, within 20 days or so. But if you ask the question, how many Einsteins and Mozarts are born in every million people? What percentage of the population has the genius potential in every million people? And can there be more, and should there be more? I think lots of very talented young people are getting lost in the crowd. The human race has this unwritten mandate to pass knowledge from one generation to the next. But libraries aren't good enough, colleges aren't fast enough, and technology still has a poor interface for the human mind. But changes are happening very quickly. Our education system has been built around just-in-case thinking, which ends up being a very poor fit for a just-in-time business world. We're learning all this stuff just in case we might have to use it sometime in the future. 99.9% of the time, we never use it. Very little of what we learn in college ever gets put to use in today's business world. And so we're running into these alternative forms of credentialing. People are trying to figure out fast-track ways to get talent moved into the workplace. So certifications are now competing directly with college degrees. There's this huge demand for cloud management certifications right now, a huge demand for cybersecurity certifications. Very soon, we're going to have a huge demand for quantum computing certifications, blockchain, cryptocurrency certifications. The average person is consuming information 12 hours every day. But we currently have no way of monitoring the salient pieces of wisdom being added to our working memory. So these disconnects will give rise to a whole new breed of assessment bots, coach bots, and teacher bots. So the early stage coach bots and teacher bots will look like smart glasses to see what we're seeing and hear what we're hearing, but they will also have sensors to feel, touch, smell, and taste everything we're experiencing. They will coach us through conversational interfaces as well as visually and through other mnemonic cues. And this will set the stage for accomplishment-based education. So this is where it gets kind of interesting, I think anyway, that sometime in the very near future, we're going to be able to have this AI buddy, this thing that we become best friends with, that we're talking back and forth with all the time. And this AI coach will then start coaching us to do things like, if you want to write a book, it will coach us on how to write a book, how to create the characters in a book, how to map out the outline for it, how to create the story arc, and how to put it together. And by the time you're done, it will have coached you through the entire process, and you'll have something that you're proud of, something that you can actually get published and you can tell your kids about sometime in the future. The same thing as if you're designing a video game. This thing will coach you on every step of the way on how to actually make a very good functioning video game. Or if you want to invent a product or produce a documentary or launch a new business or you're founding a movement or producing a podcast series or just becoming an expert on some topic, this thing will coach you along the way, and you can then produce something that's notable. We're going to start experimenting with ways to gamify education. And I suggest that one of the ways will be that we're going to start working with microcredits. And the example that I use is 100 microcredits will equal 1 college credit. And so it'll be a much more granular way of assessing learning segments. So as an example, we have lots of things that happen in our life that we're learning things, but we're not getting credit for them. So in the future, if you read a book, you might get 14.7 microcredits because your AI assessment bot actually goes through and asks you questions later and determines that you actually learned something. If you watch a movie, you might get 3.7 microcredits. The assessment bot will again ask you questions, determine if you actually learned something from that. So there's lots of educational things that are going on in our lives. We might be listening to a podcast or taking an online course or participating in a public forum or listening to a TED Talk. All of these things you might get microcredit for, and that changes the game because suddenly we're going to start rewriting the rules of achievement. So right now in academia, the highest level of achievement is a PhD, but there might be 200 or 300 new levels above a PhD that we will be able to start assigning these microcredits to. And sometime in the future, we might have somebody that is this super black belt category 5 PhD that only 3 people in the world have managed to achieve, and that's their goal in life. That will be very doable for a lot of people. So as we apply AI to teacher bots, the new game in town will be to find the fastest way to teach students. Over time, AI is going to learn every student's proclivity, their idiosyncrasies, their preferred tools, their personal reference points, and how to keep them engaged in learning even in the face of distractions. And we have lots of distractions in this world. The AI will quickly learn what skills you're proficient in, what skills you're deficient in, what's needed to bring you up to speed, how and when to schedule the training, and when you've mastered a new topic. It'll know when things are working, when things are not working, and when you've actually achieved a new skill. Throughout this training curve, individual learning will begin to scale far faster than anything we dreamed possible. 2 times, 4 times, maybe even 10 times faster. Being able to get a college degree in 1 to 2 months, it's entirely possible sometime in the future. So I've made this prediction, and this has gone around the internet quite a few times, that by 2030, the largest company on the internet, bigger than Apple, Google, and Facebook, will be an education-based company that nobody's heard of yet. But it's going to scale very quickly. Now, I have companies coming up to me almost on a daily basis saying, hey, we're that company. We're the one that's going to do that. And I keep telling them, well, then show me. So we'll see how quickly this happens. I have my eye on a few companies that I think have that potential, though. So the key takeaway here, as long as we have problems, we will always have jobs, and there's no shortage of problems. Education is the progressive realization of our own ignorance. That's an Albert Einstein quote. And the last one I'll talk about is the cryptocurrencies. The reason I added this in because this is going to change so many aspects of our lives. I think it's important that you at least be aware of some of the things that we think are coming in the very near future. See, we're entering this era of cryptocurrency banks and insurance, loans, mortgages, coaches, and advisors. So the crypto world is going to start infiltrating lots of aspects of our life. It's still too geeky at this point, but we're going to get better interfaces for these things. So there's actually 5 design features in cryptocurrency that make it much more efficient than traditional currencies. It's open, it's borderless, it's decentralized, neutral, and it's censorship resistant. The early adopters of Bitcoin were the libertarian quants. This is a group of people that wanted to change the world, and they're the ones that are super bright and know lots of ways of pulling lots of the strings. So when it comes to cryptocurrencies, we actually have 3 choices. We can fight it, use legislation, legal, and financial tactics to work against it. We can compete with it and win in the marketplace, probably not likely, or we can join the movement and embrace it. Very likely what will happen is cryptocurrency will get regulated sometime in the future. We'll see how all that unfolds and who the regulating body's going to be. but I've come up with 10 different predictions that I think are interesting points to talk through. Now, as I make predictions, there's a good possibility that I'm wrong on these predictions, but what a prediction does is it forces you to think about this time and space sometime in the future and make your own decision. So even if I'm wrong, it'll help you think about this. So prediction number one, older generations will be confused by cryptocurrencies, which will remain loyal to national currencies, giving traditional money and banks longer staying power than would normally happen. Number two, within 3 to 5 years, most major retailers like Amazon, Walmart, Home Depot, and Costco will begin accepting cryptocurrencies as payment. Number three, within 3 to 5 years, banks will begin to offer a number of cryptocurrency services, including exchanges, saving accounts, payment accounts, crypto transfers, and more. So, by the way, a lot of churches will have to figure out how to accept crypto payments and donations. By 2030, major credit cards like Visa and MasterCard will fully support and back multiple cryptocurrencies. By 2030, most banks will be working with both national currencies and cryptocurrencies. And by 2030, blockchain credit bureaus for cryptocurrency will overtake traditional credit bureaus, which will eventually go out of business. By 2030, most banks will offer cryptocurrency loans for houses, cars, and other things. By 2030, the majority of all home sales will use a blockchain system to secure the title. By 2030, the majority of all loans worldwide will use blockchain technology to secure the transaction. And then by 2035, banks will earn the majority of their income from cryptocurrency services. So we're entering a period of unprecedented opportunity. So why is this period so important? Because humanity will change more in the next 20 years than in all human history. At the same time, risk factors are going up exponentially. We're actually creating more breaking points where more things can go wrong, and they will. And so our children's children, who haven't even been born yet, some of these super children, they're depending on you to make great decisions. The people sitting in this room, they're depending on you to make great decisions. As Steve Jobs says, right now is one of those moments when you are influencing the future. But sometimes our best efforts just look a lot like this. Yep, pretty much just like that. So any of you that are interested in my book, I'll be signing some out back here. It's called Epiphany Z. And it's also available in an audio book if you want to listen to that. And we have a Futurati podcast that Trent Fowler and I do each week. And that's free to listen to anytime. And if you want more information about what we do at the Da Vinci Institute, you can just sign up for our free newsletter. And I thank you very much for having me here today. Thank you.
One piece of trivia is that the reason New Beginnings landed in Denver was because of Tom. When I was crying on his shoulder about our plans breaking through in Atlanta, where we were going to put New Beginnings, and Tom said, well, why don't you bring it over here to Denver? And so Tom helped me get it set up over there. So he's been involved for a long time. Okay, we're going to break for lunch. There is podcasting, which is something new, and we're introducing it to everybody. I think we've got 6 episodes in the can now. But be sure to stop at the table. Tom's going to be interviewed by Krista. And Tom will be around for a while, and you can visit with him too. But make sure Krista has a chance to interview him as well. So with that, why don't we say the common table prayer and give thanks.